Hey, it's Soul, and this is the tailoring guide for the War Within. We're going to start with the basics of how to get cloth. Yeah, it's already sounding a little bit different. Then we'll get to the early leveling, look at patron crafting orders, and get into specialization builds like being a master gatherer or bolt maker. Maybe you want to be a producer of Spellthread or epic gear. All that's going to be covered. This is part of my oversized profession coverage in the War Within. A link to the playlist is going to be in the corner, I think over there, and also down in the description. You want to make sure that you've at least watched the intro that covers all of the basics. If this guide is useful, please hit the like button, share this video with others, catch me live on Twitch, and if there's anything that I missed, please let me know in the comments. I'm going to make corrections. I've been making some corrections. I do need to make some right after this, and so on and so forth. This is all based on beta information. Unlike most of the professions in the War Within, some of the crafting philosophies for tailoring have been carried over from Dragonflight, and by that I mean needing to invest across multiple branches in order to master a certain craft. Don't worry, I'll help you through it, but also consider using the Craft Sim add-on to help keep you on track. It'll show you the specializations linked to a given recipe, and a link to that add-on is in the video description. So depending on your playstyle, tailoring is going to hit a little bit different, because up to this point in the War Within beta, for the most part, tailors are the primary providers of this precious cloth resource. It's sort of been leaning that way, with tailors having more perks that let them get more cloth than others. In this case, non-tailors won't see much of this weaver cloth anyway. This is the resource, and tailors are both crafter and gatherer. The consequence, on paper at least, is that there's going to be a lot less cloth circulating in the market, with many of them keeping it for themselves. Cloth isn't entirely monopolized by tailors though. It appears that miners are able to find bits of cloth off of special mining nodes, and through a sort of convoluted process, alchemists can turn items into cloth too. But when it comes to higher level or bulk crafting, there's going to be success in a tailor who's, less at the table and more on the field, taking up the gruesome task of ripping cloth away from the defeated dead. Early on, this is going to make leveling the profession feel kind of slow, so this section on early leveling is going to come off as misleading, or maybe accurate later in the expansion when surely the supply and demand have normalized. We're going to level up as high as we can, and I want to point out some observations while this b-roll is playing. You're going to be going through a lot of moss wool thread. It's the typical vendor item that tailors buy for making recipes. If you have a goblin character handy, use them to pick up this thread and then drop it off at your warbank so tailors can take advantage of the discount. Just like in Dragonflight, there's a lot of unraveling to be done, and sometimes unraveling produces rare materials used in some crafts, but I also found myself using some enchanting powder to skill up too. In fact, if you've been watching these guides as they come out, I want to point out that there are a number of recipes that ask for various rare gathering materials, and I'll cover that more when I eventually get to all of the gathering professions. So even with some outside materials, I was able to get all the way to skill level 65 using just the trainer recipes, enabling me to unlock 2 of the 4 specializations with just a few crafting orders from getting further, and I'll talk more on that later. One thing to point out, skill level 50 is where you unlock the Algari Weaverline recipe. Now this is special and maybe a reason to try and race to learn this recipe on your realm. This is a very important buff for those who are fishing, and it costs quite a few materials, including artisan's acuity. It's hard to say how much this recipe is going to be in demand and for how long, seeing as how this is a recipe that can only be fulfilled on your local realm or your guild, and the fairly low skill level requirement of 50, the window of racing for this recipe is going to be pretty small. While that keeps going, let's look at some patron orders. The rule of thumb starts out pretty simple. You want to check back often for new posts, not unlike the mission table. Ideally, complete the orders which provide all reagents, and just work your way down. Consider carefully if you want to use your own resources or concentration if needed. Early on at least, I'd say just go for broke with the concentration, but also think twice before using resources that might be harder to come by. Patron orders can reward you with precious knowledge points and sometimes special finishing reagents that help boost the quality of a craft, maybe saving you on precious concentration. Regular visits here for knowledge points will ensure that you're always caught up, even in the event where you can't fulfill a few orders. The remainder of this guide will mostly assume that you can readily reach a skill level of 65 with the remaining levels attainable through patron orders. Okay, so we did a lot of crafting, including making this weaver cloth embroidery thread. It's a finishing reagent that increases your ingenuity, and you'll want to use these in most situations when you're spending concentration. This is the recipe that'll inch you to 65, but whether you're there or you just barely hit 25, that's okay. Let's take a look at specializations. We have 4. Threads of Devotion is where you learn epic armor recipes for every slot. From Dawn until Dusk is where you can specialize for one of the 2 special threads and improve on embellished recipes. Quality Fabric is where you can learn to improve the other items like leg armor, finishing reagents, and cloth bolts, heck, even bandages. Finally, Textile Treasures is basically the gathering tree, but it also improves the secondary stats of your crafts, as in the multi-craft, the ingenuity, and the resourcefulness stats. You want to ask yourself some general questions that'll help determine your build, like, is this a character that you'll be playing regularly, or is it just part of your alt army? Do you want to farm materials yourself or gather from the auction house? And then you want to get more specific, like what is it that you want to specialize in? Armor, enhancements, reagents? Do you want to do lots of crafting every day or mostly for yourself, maybe a few friends and guildmates? I'd like to believe that there's no wrong decision. Like, the worst thing that you can do is change your mind, go backwards, and then feel stuck. But let's start with the gathering spec since it's pretty different. I suggest starting off in the quality fabric tree and drop 30 points into the main trait. This will give a chance for rank 3 cloth to drop from humanoids, which is like nasty good. Early on, it's going to feel like an essential baseline for eventually developing max quality crafts. It also means it'll probably sell super well too, and I predict quality is far more valuable than quantity. Once that node's filled up, jump over to Textile Treasures and jam that tree full of points too. This will up your chance for cloth to drop, period. The strategy that I have in mind here is that you can sell the high quality cloth and then buy cheaper cloth and have that on hand to fulfill crafting orders and to level up. Now you can stop here and branch off and start working on a new specialization, or you can take this a step further and go for the good cloth. It's going to require you to be skill level 75 so you can learn a 3rd branch, but if you put points into From Dawn Until Dusk, you get a chance for the special Dawn or Duskweave cloth to drop too. I wasn't personally able to test if the perks you earn will help you get rank 2 or 3 of this special cloth stuff, but I haven't found anything else to upgrade the quality, so it's a safe guess that going for quality fabric is the way to go. You can optionally go for quality first, then the special cloth before raising your drop rate too. The risk of going down this route is your lack of recipes to give you skill levels to reach level 75 and spec into Dawn from Dusk in the first place. While this 3rd tree is where you can still get access to special recipes that get you access to these new levels, Threads of Devotion is where you get a lot of recipes, and it helps a ton for patron orders. Of course, you might be thriving in this spec anyway, and you can afford to take your time. You might just be okay. So how about the reagent spec? How do we create the best cloth bolts or spell threads? This spec is very straightforward, but you want to keep in mind the following. Making high quality items in War Within Professions is pretty easy thanks to concentration, which will boost your craft 1 level. Mastering a specialization is less about if you can craft at max quality, but how often can you do it. So while I'll be giving some tips and guidelines, ultimately your playstyle is going to decide how big of an investment into a specialization you want to make. So let's get started. Start in quality fabric and completely fill out the base trait, then move on to weaving and unraveling. It's 60 points, and once fully invested, you'll be well on your way to creating max quality cloth bolts. Looking to do high quality tailoring cooldowns too? You can do so as soon as you finish up here, spec into From Dawn Until Dusk and learn the recipe, but the concentration cost is going to be a little bit high. Another 80 points into this tree will max out your skill, give recipes, and add secondary stat bonuses. To super optimize your character, you can also fully spec into Textile Treasures and then max out both multi-craft and resourcefulness, but you want to leave ingenuity alone because your intention has been to bring your concentration cost to near 0, and now you're just trying to save on some materials. Specking for Spellthread happens to be in the quality fabric tree too. Invest into the base trait and there you are, Spellthread. But that's only half the job. The other half is specking into Dawn Until Dusk so you can choose your favorite epic Spellthread, then pump points into these traits until you feel satisfied using concentration, or max out each node starting from the top and working your way down to eventually be free of the concentration cost altogether. I've been mentioning it now, but we should talk about Dawnweave and Duskweave and how to set up an alt army to pump out these special claws, because what else was the mob remix for? Long story short, these materials make the following goods shown on screen. Dawnweave makes epic gear and leg enchants that are tailored towards healing, a finishing reagent, and a reagent bag. Duskweave creates a set and a leg enchant for damage dealing, a different finishing reagent, and a regular bag. So what you feel like making is really up to you. Doing the alt army thing in the War Within, it's a little bit different from Dragonflight thanks to a lot of things. The objective of the alt army is to make rank 3 Dusk or Dawnweave bolts as cheaply as possible using the fewest number of skill points. Rank 3 bolts will be used for most of the recipes, but rank 1 and 2 bolts can be used for like the bags without penalty, so quality may or may not matter to you. Now let's take a look at how to start this spec. By immediately speccing into the Dawn until Dusk, you choose between the Dawn or the Duskweave paths and you can start crafting right away. If you want to make Dawnweave bags, add 10 points to the base trait. If making Duskweave bags, add 10 more points to the base trait. If you only care about being a bag factory, just spec all the way down the path of your choice and then max that out to have the most number of charges and to minimize your cooldown, and your ult is pretty much done. Just pump them full of materials of any quality, blow your cooldowns, make bags, and pray the market doesn't get saturated. But if you do care about producing high quality bolts and you want to sell those, there's kind of a lot more to it. You can start crafting rank 3 bolts kind of early using concentration, but you're going to run out of gas really fast. At a bare minimum, you're going to want to up your skill, get tools, and apply points until your concentration cost goes below 261. So far, that's the amount of concentration that you get back in a 24-hour period, so in a way, this gives you a production rate of 1 rank 3 cloth cast per day. Consider Dawn and Duskweave has a double cooldown between concentration to make it high quality and this natural cooldown. Unfortunately, there's not enough available information to give reliable numbers, and I don't want to give misleading expectations. Instead, I'm going to try and teach you the high level of what you should be looking out for when trying to make your alt army. You want to get your base skill as high as you can, so the 60s should be fine. I've already talked you through it. Spec into Dawn until Dusk, and work your way towards that bottom tree, and then fill that thing out all the way. That alone should be enough for you to make rank 3 cloth casts at least like a few times a day, and regular development of your skills will make this concentration cost get lower and lower. Now you're probably not going to need to obtain perfect stats, as in like a 0 concentration cost, because you'll still be subjected to the cooldown of making the cloth in the first place. Again, double cooldown. The goal is to reach a concentration cost that matches the rate of the cooldown. That way, every one of your cooldowns is a rank 3 and nothing is wasted. You'll want to spec into the quality fabric branch at some point to raise your multi-craft as well, followed by resourcefulness. You shouldn't need ingenuity because again, you're going to catch up to your cooldowns and then it's going to be wasted. Finally, let's cover the gear specs, using preferably other people's materials that they're all scrambling for. Funny enough, this is the easiest of the specs. It's very straightforward except for one detour. Let's first identify the sorts of embellished gear that we're working with: gloves, feet, and wrists. You need the gloves and feet to complete a 2-set bonus, meaning with regards to tier, you have no choice in how you're going to itemize. The wrists are there for priests who want to switch the set bonus of their embellished gear between DPS and healing. We're going to keep these in mind as we look at how the armor crafting build will work. Let's target something different. Let's look at belts over here on the right. A measly 5 points lets us go 1 branch down, which gives us an opportunity to learn another subspec right away. So there we go, we're now mastering belts and we learned an epic recipe. Now let's figure out how to make this belt at max quality using concentration. In the case of gear, going for quality is a lot more forgiving because we only need to use concentration once to get our desired quality, unlike the consumables and reagents that need multiple casts. Focusing on the base trait and the subspecs below, it's going to do a few things. First, it's going to give you access to all the epic gear that's locked in this tree. As a consequence, these recipes will give you that much more flexibility to complete crafting orders for patrons. It'll also give you enough skill level to start making these at maximum quality, with only a bit more legwork to craft or recraft these at a mythic level. At any time though, you may want to pivot over to From Dusk Until Dawn to start learning how to make the embellished gear, but of course that depends if the demand allows it. In this case, you want to progress and max out the middle trait to learn recipes and up your skill. If you're going back and forth between the two branches, I only advise making sure that you're adding 5 points at a time to ensure that you're hitting a milestone bonus each time. Otherwise, it's not really that huge of a deal if you're jumping around after at least learning the recipes. Further down this tree is where you can learn the bracer recipe. Let's talk about profession tools and enchants and give some quick tips. If you're in the business of making cloth or reagents, no matter what, you want to go multi-craft and resourcefulness. When crafting patron orders, making bags, or unraveling, go double resourcefulness. If making gear for yourself or others, or if you're in a situation where you're at risk of having too many cloth cooldowns, run double ingenuity so you can keep crafting high quality products. There are also special profession bags that all professions can use, and they're coming from you, they're coming from tailors. The recipes come from all over, so a tailor interested in these is going to be the kind of tailor who will be out in the field a lot. Just kidding, they can probably transfer resources with their warband. The bag that tailors use is the Severed Satchel, and it increases how much thread you obtain via unraveling by 1. It's not much, but it's also fairly cheap to make, so it'll pay for itself eventually. Tailoring is one of the slightly tougher professions to work with due to needing to cross over to other spec branches for many of its masteries. As is, we'll also face a unique challenge with tailors bringing in the vast majority of the crafting materials. This sort of seems like it's going to be offset by what I predict will be an army of non-player alts producing goods faster than normal. However, the Dawn and Duskweave cloth are only used for certain recipes that might not interest everyone. On the other hand, it might be the regular cloth bolts that are harder to come by if concentration resources are mostly spent on the daily cooldowns, but I also expect the market to eventually respond to this overabundance of special cloth and then spend its concentration elsewhere. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. Maybe it'll all turn out more simple than I'm thinking, but for now, that's the guide. I hope this, if nothing else, gave you an idea of what's to come. Please like the video if it was helpful and share it with others. Subscribe for more WoW coverage, catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.